for the full interview with Albania's returning Prime Minister Edi Rama, conducted by TVP World's Aisha Abaji, please visit our YouTube channel. And now, as the EU decides the final shape of the next package of sanctions for Russia, a history-defining meeting between Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Vladimir Putin could be in the making. Is Vladimir Putin going to show up? Could the EU force Russia into a ceasefire? Is Moscow going to let go, at least partially, of its maximalist demands? We will discuss that and more with my guest tonight, Stephen Moore, founder of the Ukraine Freedom Project. Stephen, great to have you in the studio and finally meet you in person.
Yeah, what a nice change of pace.
Definitely. So we are looking at the meeting which is meant to take place in Turkey on Thursday. Rubio, Witkoff and Kellogg attending the meeting. That is according to an official statement by the White House. What do you think is going to be Zelensky's response, considering that Donald Trump might not be the one showing in person?
Well, I think he's got a good team there because, I look at Rubio is a very solid foreign policy player. He is a foreign policy realist. He knows what he's doing. You've got Kellogg, who is probably the most pro-Ukraine member of Trump's administration. And then Witkoff, who is really good at real estate deals.
Why would you say that this particular team is going to make a difference? Wouldn't it be better if Donald Trump would actually show up in person and say, guys, let's sit by the table?
Yeah, listen, if I could figure out what's going on inside Trump's head, I would be making a lot more money than I am now. So, he may show. We don't know. But, they're sending the right signals because, the 2 out of 3 of the folks that are coming to this are really solid in their credentials and are good to have on that negotiating team. So this is the United States showing a real interest. And I think that what probably is happening is that, Putin has not made any solid, he's maybe I'll come, maybe I won't. And so I don't think Trump wants to show up and be waiting for Putin. And so I think that's probably what a lot of what you're seeing.
So only minutes before we started the show, Kyiv Post wrote on X, the Russian delegation will be in Istanbul on May 15th and will wait there for the Ukrainian side. And they said that following Putin spokesman Peskov's words. The choice of words is interesting because they said a delegation, so they did not specify that Putin himself is going to show in person. Considering the circumstances, do you think he's going to make that trip to Turkey?
And again, Putin's a mystery as well, because Putin is, this is not about peace for Putin. This is how can I advance my goals of becoming a Russian czar in the mold of Peter the Great. So that's his goal. Now, whether we have a short-term peace out of that, that's something that may be in his interest at this point, because Russia's taken a big hit on this. 1 million casualties. They've been at this for 10 years. They've taken 18% of Ukraine, and it's cost them 1 million Russian soldiers. And it's cost them, they're using like World War II era tanks because the Ukrainians have blown up the rest of them. And so this may be a point at which Putin is, needs this relief. But now the goal for the West, how do you turn this into a long-term peace rather than just a few months, a year, giving Putin time to rearm?
So what you're saying is that Putin is playing for time, but what would be, in your opinion, the solution to find this sort of a long-term peace deal with Putin, if there's any at all?
Yeah, well, it's got to be a change of attitude in Putin. And, in my view, there is no substitute for Putin being defeated and being soundly defeated. And the other substitute might be, if he decides to fight on, if there's sufficient sanctions to choke off the revenue for his war machine, then that's something else that could cause a real change in the situation between Russia and Ukraine.
So we heard about the demands that Russia is continuously making, the maximalist demands, keeping the occupied oblasts, so the regions that it currently occupies, Ukraine not getting closer to NATO, Ukraine disarming. This sounds more like Ukraine's capitulation than any sort of a ceasefire, if you ask my humble opinion. Is there any scenario in which Russia is going to be forced? So it's not going to be the change coming from Putin, but Russia is going to be effectively forced into the position of changing their mind.
Yeah, and I think it's going to involve the world actually enforcing these sanctions. Let's look at the EU. The EU has sent more money to Russia in the form of payments for cheap LNG than they have to Ukraine for its defense. You look at Belgium, they control $250 billion in frozen Russian assets.
And this is something that the European Union is currently working on as well, to limit the money that is being spent on those resources.
It's more than 3 years. How long is this work going to take?
I'm afraid this is not a question for me.
Yeah. Well, I just got back from the U.S. I just flew in Warsaw just yesterday, and I spent time in Oklahoma, Texas, and Florida. These are red states, and the challenge here. This is theater in many ways, because Putin. People are like, hey, why can't they just get along? Americans, particularly Trump supporters, don't really understand what's going on here. And so it's time for Zelenskyy to put on, he's a performer, he's an actor. He needs to display that it's not him that's the problem, that it's Putin that is standing in the way of the peace. And that's something that's a message that's gaining traction amongst Trump supporters. And until it really takes hold, then Trump doesn't feel the need to put out the heavy hand.
So we know that the European Union is working on another package of sanctions, the 17th package of sanctions, and the number is quite significant because it's the 17th package, because they're trying to force Russia into a 30-day ceasefire. They're trying to circumvent the Hungarian veto on that package. It's supposed to be announced on Wednesday. What sanctions do you think at this point in time would actually work? Because this is the 17th package of sanctions.
Well, and again, it's not really about the sanctions. It's about the enforcement of the sanctions. So Russia has a ghost fleet of tankers numbering in the hundreds that, come out of St. Petersburg and go to the Indian Ocean, meet an Indian tanker. They exchange the oil and they pay a price above the cap for the Russians, above the sanctions. EU trade with Kazakhstan has increased 1,000% since the war started, or thereabouts. And Kazakhstan's trade with Russia has increased a similar amount. So it would be easy to start interdicting these ships that are violating the sanctions. But, there's only a few people that are doing that. I think the Germans and one of the Baltic states has actually stopped one of these illicit oil transactions.
And I mean, the recent packages of sanctions, 16th package targeted them earlier this year. We know that the UK introduced a package of sanctions for the Shadow Fleet on May 9th as well. So let's hope that this is going to bring some results. And we are looking closely at what's going to happen on Thursday. Stephen Moore, thank you so much for joining me in the studio.
It's more fun here. I like it.
Please come more often.
Thanks.
Stephen Moore, founder of the Ukraine Freedom Project, was my guest. Thank you so much for joining. This would be all for now here on World News Tonight. But please do stay tuned. We're back in just a moment with more news and features.